Ask anyone how many aircraft carriers America has and you'll hear the same number, 11. That number is wrong. The real one is bigger, and the proof is a ship most people have never heard of, hiding in plain sight under a different name. In 2014, the United States Navy commissioned that ship, a $3.4 billion warship, and left out the single most important room, not by accident, on purpose. The ship was called an amphibious assault ship, and the room they deleted was the well deck, the flooded garage at the stern where the landing craft launched from. It is, quite literally, the thing that makes an amphibious ship amphibious, the reason the class exists. For 50 years, every big deck amphib America launched had one. Sailors joke that you could park a small apartment building inside. The honest truth is you could park several, and then flood the whole room on command. Take it away, and by the book, the ship can no longer do its own job. A landing ship that cannot launch its landing force. The Marines said exactly that, loudly, for years. The arguments got loud enough that the Navy did something it almost never does. It put the correction in writing and agreed to put the missing room back into the very next ship. Case closed, a $1 billion mistake admitted in writing and fixed on the drawing board. In most stories, that would be the ending. File it next to every other procurement blunder and move on. Except that's not how this story ends. Because while everyone argued, that broken ship went to sea and quietly proved something nobody expected, that a 45,000-ton hull could operate a deck full of stealth fighters and behave like something America wasn't supposed to have. A second kind of aircraft carrier. And here's the part that should make you sit up. China watched all of it and started building its own. This is the story of the USS America, the 844-foot mistake that invented the future, and the reason the honest count of American carriers doesn't stop at 11. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly what they cut, why the Marines fought it, what those trials at sea proved, what it costs next to a super carrier, and why Beijing is now building its own version. Stick around for that last part because it changes how you read this whole story. To understand the outrage, you need to see what they removed. Every big deck amphibious ship America built for half a century has a well deck, a cavernous bay at the waterline big enough to park machines the size of houses, that floods on command, the stern gate drops, the sea rolls in, and giant air cushion hovercraft swim straight out of the ship's belly toward the beach at 40 knots, carrying tanks and armored vehicles on their backs. It is the delivery system for the entire Marine landing force. The tanks, the vehicles, the heavy gear. The ship exists to carry Marines. The well deck is how the Marines actually get ashore. Picture the scale of what rides inside one of these hulls. Over 1,000 sailors, and on top of them, close to 1,700 Marines with their vehicles, artillery, and supplies. A small floating town built around one delivery ramp at the stern. And on the USS America, the lead ship of the Navy's newest amphibious class, the designers cut it. Deliberately. Gone. The Navy's own line was simple. This ship would trade the surface punch for the air punch. What nobody fully grasped yet was how far that trade would go. So what did they spend all that space on? Aviation. In place of the well deck, the America got a far bigger hangar with high bay workspaces, deep maintenance shops with overhead cranes, and vastly expanded storage for jet fuel. A warship rebuilt from the inside around one idea: keep fighters flying, hard, day after day, far from any friendly runway. Because that is the dirty secret of jump jets at sea. They live and die on fuel and maintenance, and a standard amphib runs short of both. The ship itself is enormous, 844 feet long, around 45,000 tons at full load, driven by gas turbines at over 22 knots. Hold that number, 45,000 tons. That makes this amphibious ship bigger than the flagship aircraft carriers of France, Italy, or Japan. America built a carrier-sized hull, filled it with fuel and jets, and then filed it under a different name, and the air group that name hides is remarkable. A typical loadout runs a dozen V-22 Osprey tilt rotors, half a dozen F-35B stealth fighters, heavy-lift King Stallion helicopters, a screen of attack and utility helos, and in the fighter-heavy configuration, the deck trades the rotors away and stacks up the jets instead. For self-defense, she carries rolling airframe missiles, Sea Sparrows, and phalanx guns, enough to make a low-flying missile's day very short. The Marines were not amused. To them, the math was brutal. An amphibious ship that cannot launch landing craft is an amphibious ship that cannot land the force, and no amount of aviation makes up for gear stranded at sea. Critics called the design crippled. The arguments ran for years. In hearings and in print, analysts called the capability crimped. Officers asked pointed questions about how exactly a marine tank swims ashore from a ship with no boats. And the debate followed the class through two hulls, because the America's sister ship, the USS Tripoli, was built to the same well-deckless design. Two multi-billion-dollar ships, both missing the room their own ship type is named for. To the critics, that wasn't a design philosophy. That was a mistake repeated. And in the end, the Navy blinked. The Navy and the Marine Corps signed a formal memorandum of agreement, and the well deck went back into the design. The next ship of the class, the USS Bougainville, is being built with its well deck restored, and every ship after her will have one too. Read that story quickly, and it sounds like a clean admission of failure. They broke the design, the Marines revolted, the grown-ups fixed it. But that reading misses what happened at sea in between, because while the argument raged, the USS America was busy becoming a laboratory. In November of 2016, the Navy loaded 12 F-35B stealth fighters onto her deck at once. At the time, the largest group of 5th-generation jets ever put to sea on any ship anywhere. They called it a proof of concept, and the pictures went around the world. A flat gray deck lined nose to tail with stealth fighters on a ship that officially wasn't a carrier. 3 years later, off the Pacific coast, she was operating 13 at once. The design goal runs to 20 or more, and every trial pushed the same question. Forget the well deck, what happens if you use this hull as a pure fighter platform? The answer had a name almost before the trials ended: the Lightning carrier, after the F-35 Lightning itself. Not an official ship type, you won't find it in the Navy's registry, but say it at the Pentagon and everyone knows exactly which hull you mean. Stop and weigh what that actually is. The F-35B is a 5th-generation stealth fighter that takes off in a few hundred feet and lands straight down like a helicopter. No catapults, no arresting wires, no giant flight deck required. It carries the same sensors and the same stealth skin as its bigger brothers, and it turns any flat deck into an airbase. That single trick rewrites the map. Suddenly, ships that were never counted as carriers can put 5th-generation air power over a fight. Put up to 20 of them on one 45,000-ton hull, and you have a single ship carrying more modern stealth fighters than most of the world's air forces possess in total. Not most navies, most air forces. Entire countries defend their skies with fewer 5th-generation jets than this one amphibious ship can bring to a fight. Run down the list of the world's air forces, and the number that operate any stealth fighter at all is a short one. And this single hull can put a squadron and a half of them anywhere there's ocean. And unlike a land base, it moves hundreds of miles a day, hides in weather and open ocean, and forces an enemy to spend missiles just figuring out where it went. A runway can be cratered. This one relocates overnight. Now put a price on it, because this is where the idea gets dangerous, in a good way. A Ford-class supercarrier costs around $13 billion before you even buy its air wing. Takes the better part of a decade to build, and America only has so many of them, each one a floating city of 5,000 people that an enemy would love to find. The USS America cost roughly $3.4 billion, about a quarter of a supercarrier. So for the price of one Ford, you could put several Lightning carriers to sea, each with its own deck of stealth fighters. Each a separate target an enemy has to find, track, and fight, and each one able to be in a different place at once. An admiral with one supercarrier can threaten one region. An admiral with 4 Lightning carriers can complicate an entire ocean. And this is exactly why the official carrier count misleads people. The 11 supercarriers are only the heavyweights. Behind them stands a second tier of big flat decks led by ships like the America that any enemy planner has to count as carriers, whatever the paperwork says. Spreading the punch across more hulls is exactly the direction the Navy says modern war is heading. The mistake ship turned out to be a preview of the strategy the Navy now preaches. Spread the force, multiply the targets, make the enemy's math miserable. One giant deck is a masterpiece and a single point of failure. 5 smaller decks are a headache that never ends. Now, let's be honest, because this channel doesn't sell fairy tales. A Lightning carrier is not a supercarrier, and pretending otherwise gets sailors killed. With no catapults, she cannot launch the heavy aircraft that make a carrier air wing whole. No big early warning radar planes, no heavyweight tankers. Her jets take off on their own engine power, which means they fly with less fuel and fewer weapons than a catapult could throw into the sky. A real cost in range and punch that no press release can talk away. She's slower than a nuclear carrier, her magazines are smaller, her fuel is finite where a supercarrier's reactor runs for decades, and her defenses are a fraction of a strike group's layered shield. In a stand-up fight, one Ford with its full air wing outclasses her many times over. More jets, heavier jets, flying farther, with radar planes watching hundreds of miles ahead. Nobody serious disputes that. The Lightning carrier isn't a replacement for the supercarrier, it's an addition to it, a way to be in more places with real air power for a fraction of the money. That was never the question. The question was whether 20 stealth fighters on a $3 billion hull is a weapon worth having, and the answer came from an unexpected direction. Beijing answered it. While American commentators were still calling the America class a failed experiment, China was studying it closely. And in December of 2024, in a Shanghai shipyard, it launched the Type 076, a giant new amphibious assault ship that takes the American idea and pushes it one step further. A well deck for landing craft below, and on top, an electromagnetic catapult with arresting gear, carrier equipment, built to throw combat drones and jets off the bow, an amphib and a carrier fused into one hull. Sound familiar? It should. It is the exact question the USS America asked first, and Beijing wasn't alone in taking notes. Allies from Japan to Britain have been reshaping their own flat decks around the same jump jet, chasing the formula this mistake proved at sea. China looked at the ship America built by mistake, the amphib that behaves like a carrier, and liked the idea so much it built its own with upgrades. The ship is called the Sichuan, and when it hit the water, it was the largest amphibious assault ship on the planet. Nations don't copy failures. They copy weapons that scare them, and then they try to outbuild them. Which brings us back to the ship that fixed the mistake. The USS Bougainville, the next America-class ship with the well deck restored, is finishing construction now, with delivery expected in 2026, and two more hulls already named and coming behind her, the Fallujah and the Helmand province, each carrying the names of marine battles into the Pacific Age. But look closely at what the Navy actually did, because this is the twist. They didn't abandon the aviation ship and go back to the old design. They kept the big deck, kept the F-35Bs, kept the Lightning carrier playbook, and added the well deck back on top of it. The correction isn't a retreat from the America's idea, it's the idea completed. The experiment worked so well they made it standard. The Bougainville herself tells the story in steel. Launched in 2023, christened that December, she keeps the aviation first heart of the America design and simply adds the landing craft back underneath it. And the two mistake ships themselves? They are exactly where you'd put ships you believe in. The USS Tripoli is forward deployed to Sasebo, Japan, permanently based in the Western Pacific. A Lightning carrier sitting a short sail from the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, the most watched waters on Earth. The USS America spent years forward deployed to that same Japanese port, the tip of the spear 7,000 miles from home, and operates today from the West Coast, still cycling F-35Bs off her deck, a workhorse the fleet quietly treats as exactly what the Pentagon says she isn't, a carrier. These are not ships hidden in a reserve fleet while the Navy waits for them to age out. They are on the front line of the exact ocean where 20 stealth fighters on a moving deck matter most. And notice the quiet detail in that. The Navy sent the ships it supposedly got wrong to the one theater it cannot afford to get wrong. So here's the honest verdict on the ship they called a mistake. The critics were right. A Marine landing force needs its landing craft, and the well deck belongs in the design. But the broken ship was right too, because it proved in steel and salt water that America could put a second, cheaper kind of carrier to sea, and it forced friend and rival alike to take the idea seriously. The next generation of American ships carries both answers in one hull. That is not the story of a failure. That is how a Navy learns. Build it, break the mold, argue hard in the open, admit what failed, and keep the part that works. Rigid fleets don't do that. Winning fleets do. The USS America got the argument started. The fleet that follows her, well, decks, stealth fighters and all, will finish it. If you want the story of the Navy's other new giant, the battleship it's building from scratch, that one's next.